Hey folks, Brandon Vigliarolo with the Register, and I'm here with Jason Walls, co-director of the Broadband Forum's User Services Worker Area, to talk about a historic anniversary that we're celebrating today, 20 years of Technical Report 69, which has arguably helped shape the modern internet service landscape and is probably familiar to anyone who's ever remotely provisioned a system. Jason, thanks for joining me.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but TR-069, the main thing it defines is remote management of end user devices, right? So that how critical has that been to the development of the modern internet landscape?
So it's such an interesting story because it started at the advent of gateways, right? Which wasn't always the case when delivering broadband, right? And once that started to happen, and operators were going around trying to figure out different ways to not do truck rolls, right? They used to send you like a CD-ROM, right?
Right.
To run on your PC to configure the device, and that was a whole other protocol, and it was doing it locally. And they were like, wait a minute, what if we build a protocol that does this? And it had a number of cool fallouts from it, right? So in addition to the fact that it provided a way for ISPs to remotely manage, monitor, configure, and manage the life cycle of their CPE, it also started us down the road of modeling via an information model everything about those devices, and what different things mean and how they're configured. And that mapping ended up helping us in a number of other ways later on. But that sort of was like, the meat behind what ended up happening. And what was cool about TR-069, other than, it being sort of the first time that people were trying to do this, is that we right out of the gate, I was at least, when I got involved, we started doing interoperability a lot. Right. And making sure that it was working well with everyone and everyone's auto configuration server or ACS and their clients were all working together. There was a lot of testing involved. A lot of that was done, most of that is done by us at QA Cafe, right? Through our CD router test platform. And so it has proven that it's worked, right? It's gotten the bugs out of the system. People can rely on it. And now TR-069 there's over 1 billion deployments.
Right. Yeah. It's fairly safe to say it is a standard, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's weird because I was just talking to Svi Skipinker from Friendly Technologies. They make an ACS on my podcast, the Epic Melon podcast. And we were talking about how this is weird because it's such a labor of love that people don't see, right? It's like the average consumer has no idea that this exists.
Oh yeah. I would say most technical reports on the internet, it's like most people are like the what now, the who? Yeah, right. It's not a very well known layer of very important layer of this. And so speaking of important layers, right? I understand 20 years of TR-069 is also kind of the moment at which you guys are depreciating it in favor of TR-369, which defines the User Services Platform Protocol, right?
Right. Yep. Which, in addition to sort of us, so what happened was in 2015, we all sat down in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, at the Broadband Forum meeting that was there. We went to my office and we were like, okay, it's time. And what then we were calling it TR-069 2.0. And we were like, what do we need to do? If we started from scratch today with everything that we now have at our disposal and everything that we learned, what would we do? And there were a number of very, very cool things that came out of that. So in addition to just being faster and better and using modern communication protocol technology, we thought, well, okay, what if we need to manage the next order of magnitude of devices? What if it's not just about gateways anymore? What if it's about many, many different use cases, right? So I think one of the most powerful things that we did out of that was what we would say is like the multi-controller model, because TR-069 was made so that a CPE connects to a server that's meant to configure it, and it does its thing, and that's that,
Right.
And then in USP, we're like, what if there were many different reasons you would want to connect to a device and learn about what it can do and configure it and monitor it and use proactive metrics and all these things. And all of those use cases might be separate and maybe operated by different people, right? And that turned into what we have now, which really is working like that, right? So you have some people that are using USP in one system to do the same stuff you would have done in TR-069. At the same time, it's using another system to do all of the mass telemetry, and AI metrics and all those things. And at the same time, they're building an app on somebody's phone that's also using USP to configure the device and do all kinds of stuff. And it's really awesome. And then on top of that, we're actually using it internal to the device to, for the first time, create a truly interoperable platform for building applications for the gateway.
Right, right. And so I guess maybe it's not entirely safe, or not safe, not entirely fair to ask, right? Because I was going to ask you about, kind of like the share of TR-69 implementations. You said there's billions of them, right? What kind of split are we looking at? But it seems like 369 covers a lot more ground than 69. So maybe it's not fair to say what's the split. But I guess maybe how many TR-69 implementations have been replaced with 369? Like what percentage are we looking at here?
I wouldn't say there's a good number right now. There are many. I wouldn't say there's a good way to know that information right now, other than the conversations that we've had with people. But the thing to understand is that we built 369 to be backwards compatible and to coexist with TR-69.
Okay, right.
And so at the recent USP summit, actually, and you can find the videos on YouTube, on the Broadband Forum's YouTube, we had a number of conversations about that and what are people doing to make that transition? What are people doing to have them coexist? Are they using TR-69 for existing deployment models to still do firmware upgrades and all those things that it still does?
Right.
Meanwhile, they're using USB for something else. Are they using USB for an entire new set of devices? We had some operators who were like, you know what, we're going to leave TR-69 where it is. We're going to use USB in our set-top boxes and go from there. And then in the future, we'll switch it all over, right? And then there's the multi-use case thing. And so it's really cool because the data model is backwards compatible for the most part. There's some things you have to consider. And so the understanding of what's out there and how to do it, is really made the transition very easy. And all of the operators that you've seen talk at our summits that's basically what they say is that, that not to worry about the transition process because it's, we did the right things.
Right. So good. It's working as intended and smoothly. People aren't finding themselves stuck on one situation or whatever. So I guess that kind of raises the question to me, and I'm assuming that the answer has to do with backwards compatibility here. But say, right, you were talking about set-top boxes, right? In one case for an ISP or a television provider, could they push software compatible with 369 or with USB to a device that's configured for 69, or we're looking at the need for new hardware here?
For the most part, yes, if the device is capable of supporting device 2. So TR-181 is the data model right behind TR-69 and USB. So as long as everybody's systems understands that, then yes, for the most part, it could, in theory, be done like that, right?
So TR-181 compatible systems can use either, basically. Okay, good. That's good to know too, right? If a company decides they want to change their method of deployment here, it's not like they're completely stuck going back to the drawing board, telling their customers they got to get all new hardware, reissuing all this stuff. They could theoretically push new firmware to a device or something and fix it.
And that's all really dependent on how old is old, right? But ironically, for the most part, USB has a smaller footprint and is more efficient on the network. So.
Well, fantastic. Right? Yeah, exactly. Right. But yeah, some devices may not be able to handle it, but gosh, we'd hope so that you can get most of these old things off there and get them supporting some newer, better firmware. But of course, when enough older stuff is end of life, right, there's no point in trying to push new firmware to it or whatever. So I guess with the end of TR-69 and the beginning of USB, the new era of USB, you said deployment is hard to gain, hard to measure at this point, but hasn't been super widespread. But I mean, at what point are you thinking at what point are we looking at a tipping point here for adoption? Or do you see this being a thing that happens quickly with the formal sort of declaration that 69 is depreciated?
I think that with every single technology, you will always find the killer use cases that end up making that tipping point, right?
Right.
We can talk about IPv6 for days, right? But I think that what we've seen is that operators who are deploying USP, they see the value in what it can do for them, right? And they're using it to realize those specific values.
Gotcha.
And that might be because they have way more devices they have to manage, and USB is more efficient and can be broken up to do different things. To sort of load manage, not literally, right?
Right.
Farm things off to different systems so they can all handle their own things, and that goes all the way up to the business case, right? So you have different teams looking at different stuff, and they don't have to all interact with the same system, or newer devices, or different kinds of devices, right? And so that is where you will see the transition first, right? Are there a
Right.
lot of people that are just ripping out all their own old TR-69 stuff and putting in USB stuff? Probably
Yeah.
not, right?
Probably not. Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
why which is why we don't really use the term, deprecate in the way that,
Right. Okay. Fair
right?
enough. Yeah.
As like a hard line. It really just means, and for the people listening, what it really means for TR-69 in 20 years is that the time has come for us to be like, okay, we're not going to change anything about it, right?
Right.
We're not going to entertain any updates to it. We're not going to fix anything. Unless unless it's something super minor that doesn't need a rev to the entire protocol,
Right.
right?
Right.
So all of our work in the future, for now and in the future, and has been, right, is all going to be on TR-369.
Right. Right. Well, good. I mean, it's good to know that this isn't sort of like a, because I mean, I'm sure plenty of people are saying, hey, 20 years of TR-69, and then hearing, what I said about depreciation, and they're like, oh God, the
Well,
next few years, right? And it's not
it
going to be
is.
that big of a deal, right? It's not going to be that big of a panic.
It's a
right?
little nerve-wracking, but I'll give you
Yeah,
some examples,
exactly.
right? We're still going to test it. The certifications are still going to be live because there are many people that would rather just use it, and that's fine. And people still want to prove that their stuff is going to work. That's all still going to be active. We're still going to be we're still going to be making updates to TR-181 that is compatible with both TR-69 and USB for the foreseeable future, unless for some reason that becomes impractical in the future. We'll always be releasing both versions of the data model, right?
Right.
And I like to think of it as like a sunsetting, right? Like we had this great graphic at the end of the USB summit of TR-69 sort of riding off in the sunset on a horse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, he'll still be there.
It's still around. The legend lives on, right? Yeah, yeah. So basically, the message is, the legend lives on. It's not going to be an end of the world sort of apocalyptic scenario. You got to worry about changing right away. Gradual process, but time to get with the latest protocol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
yeah, and like I said, all it really means is that if someone came along to us tomorrow and was like, "We'd like you to make Amendment 7 of TR-69," we would be like, "No, I don't think we're doing that."
Yeah, and that's fair. It's been 20 years, so
yeah.
All right, hey Jason, thanks so much for coming on and talking to me today. It's been great to chat with you about this.
Absolutely, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and if you want to read any more about the latest big changes to protocols and the things that underlie our internet today, you can read about them on the Register.